Okay.
Alright.
Alright, so we haven't talked about Pork Chop Hill and your experience on Pork Chop Hill.
Well, Pork Chop Hill was again a highland that we had to take over. There were Chinese had, or not Korean, were in possession of. And we were told that we had to take Pork Chop Hill. And in doing so, we lost several hundred men died there doing this, because it was actually all the 279th that did this. And A Company, we have like 200 men in A Company. That, of course, A Company being A, B, C, D. A is always first to go in and get most of this work done. And it was just a whole lot of shooting, and we just couldn't do it by ourselves. So B Company came in, C Company, and finally we had enough help to move the Chinese off of there. Well, they thought, the world thought it was big enough of a battle to make a movie called Pork Chop Hill. And that's what we did on Pork Chop Hill. And
yeah.
I have a souvenir. I got that flag from Pork Chop Hill.
Yeah. So, do you have any stories from your time setting up the DMZ line?
Any what?
Stories from your time setting up the DMZ line.
Okay, to set up the DMZ line, that was with the 1st Cavalry. That was before the 45th Division. When the 1st Cavalry, when we got up to where we were going to set up the DMZ, because the DMZ had to be set, the Chinese or North Koreans wanted a straight across line across Korea. We did not want that. We wanted it to go the way the mountain range went so that we could protect it. So what they did, they defoliated all the DMZ area, and we started putting up barbed wire, and the Chinese or North Koreans, the communists, I want to call them, kept shooting rockets at us and attacking us, and we had to call the Air Force to make them back off and that kind of stuff. And we set up barbed wire and barbed wire and barbed wire. We even set up in that barbed wire, we had this barbed wire was terrible. It was in big rolls, and you stretch it out, and it's all like razor blades on it. And we put that onto the barbed wire, so that there's no way that when they would attack that they could climb over this without cutting themselves badly, because barbed wire, just like they have on the jails, the top one, with all razor blade like on it. Well, we'd set that up like that, and that's the one that when we'd have that set up, they wanted to destroy that real bad. And sometimes they would attack us hundreds at a time, and we would just keep shooting at them. They would fall on top of this barbed wire, and some others would climb over the top of them, and we'd shoot them, and more would fall on top of them. It was complete massacre, and because there was so much blood too, like 2 days later, it would stink something horrible. And we had to go there and take their sneakers off, take their guns for the South Korean, or Rock Army they called it. So we had to get all those weapons off there, and their shoes, and sometimes their shirts or whatever. But it was a bloody mess. It was a real horror show to see that. It's a wonder that more soldiers didn't have more nightmares about doing these type of things, because these are human beings. Whether you want to call them communists, not South Korea, groups, whatever you want to call them, they weren't animals. They were human beings. They were cut up bad. They were shot up bad. But then that's what wars do. You fight. You fight. And when you're losing the battle, you call the big artillery, or you call the Navy, and they send their planes. And that was something too. Sometimes we would be out on patrol, and they would get the best of us, and we called the Navy plane. And the Navy would drop napalm, 50-gallon drums of napalm, but they would drop way behind us, and we could see the barrel falling out of the airplane. And, oh my God, they're gonna miss, they're gonna hit us. But the barrel, they would, and they would always hit them right on the spot. I'd give them a great coordinate. They would always hit exactly where we tell them to drop those barrels. But it was amazing how they would drop those so far ahead of time. You could see them drop from behind us, and the barrel would go overhead stuff, because when those barrels explode,
you don't want to be near them.
It would be near, because it doesn't just burn you. What it does is it sucks all the oxygen out of the air, and it collapses your lungs, it kills you from lung collapse. So it's really another
It's not a pleasant experience.
It's not a very pleasant experience to see. Because I never experienced there. And then one time, when the 45th Division came over, after the 1st Cavalry went back and the 45th Division came over and stuff, the captain came over and he says, how good are those recoilless rifles? 57 recoilless rifles. Well, I said, it's terrific. I said, you can long range something. He says, well, can you shoot at that mountain across there? I says, well, that looks about like 1,800 yards. He says, well, we can see a trench over there. I said, yeah, I can put a round in the trench, you know. So, well, let's see you do that. So I set my recoilless rifle and aimed it. And I fired my round, but I kept watching the telescope. I kept following the round going where it was going. And just as they got there, the Chinese stood up and they hit the Chinese and it just boom. It was kind of a captain, but he was all happy that
got him.
Got him like that. But I felt bad for Chinese. At that time when the round was coming, there's no way you could stop it because I could see the round because of my telescope on top of the thing. I could see the round going out there. And just as I got there, somebody stood up. Yeah. That was another poor excuse of somebody dying, I guess. But it was terrible. You know how terrible it was that? They will always be, because if you go to the beach and one little kid will build a sand castle on the beach and he's all proud of himself, what will happen? Another kid comes along and kicks it down, right? Those two kids, one thing does something beautiful, the other kid will knock it down. Well, it's the same thing with grown-ups. They build big, beautiful cities. And look at what Israel is doing right now with Hamas. They're knocking those buildings down one after the other. Stuff, cities, they're knocking them down. Like, they're throwing rockets into Israel. I mean, why are they doing this? I mean, as long as you have two people, they're going to have wars. People are going to have to die. And it seems so stupid that people would want to have wars. They claim, oh, well, yeah, your country sent in the rockets and they killed some innocent people. Well, yeah, well, you put the kids in front of the place where there's going to be a target, so the kids get blown up stuff. And of course, there was always an excuse of why you did this and why that one did that. And there'll always be some wars. And,
so you were 17 and a platoon leader in Korea. Did you ever get flack from the other guys because you were the youngest?
Oh, yeah, most of the time they used to call me Phoebe. I don't know where they got the name from or what it actually meant, but sometimes they call me Phoebe, Captain Phoebe. We got a problem, stuff like that. Well, I wasn't the captain, I wasn't any of that kind of stuff. But, yeah, just imagine if a guy is like 30 years old, taking orders from somebody that's 17 years old, that has no West Point authority or no big type of...
No education.
No education to start off with. But they didn't know about my education because I didn't brag about not going to high school or anything. But I was the one that could read the maps. I'm the one that could tell the radio man. I had the radio man with me all the time on patrol, telling grid coordinates to hit this place or hit that place. I knew how to do that. They didn't know how to do that. So they thought I was educated, but I wasn't. I had to learn a lot of that stuff in Boy Scouts, and then of course for basic training, I elevated that to a higher degree and stuff, and which turned out real good for me there in that aspect. And being so smart, that's probably why I had to stay back in Korea when I first came back to Japan. If I wouldn't have been so smart, of an Alex, maybe I'd have went back to Japan for the first cavalry.
Yeah.
But that's another story.
Can you talk about Can you talk about your time on reserve? Because you did 30 days and then you came back for 15.
15 days in the reserve area. So when we came back to reserve area, it was supposed to be like a 15-day training, cleaning up type process. And I took on a job giving the guys haircuts. But we didn't have electric type. We had clippers. And when you clip the hair like that, it pulls the hair out, and the guys would scream and stuff. But I had a lot of guys to give haircuts to, because I went 15 days. But in the meantime, in between things, they would do a lot of training when they were supposedly on the reserve area. They would take out for hikes up the hills and stuff, and how to blow up a tree with C3 and stuff. A C3 is a form of dynamite. It's like butter square.
Huh.
It comes in a square, just like a quarter pound of butter. And now they use C5, but back then in Korea it was called C3. And what you would do with that, it was probably 20 times more potent than dynamite. And you could take a piece of this here and you could blow up a tree off its stump. But you have to cover it with mud, cover it, so that it would, when it would blow up, if it had any kind of resistance, the resistance would go in all directions. So you could blow up a tree out of the way of something that you wanted to do. Like one time there was a tank that used to come out at nighttime. Every night the tank would come out and would shoot rounds towards us. But it was a Russian tank, I remember the number on it. It was R backwards 5, but it was backwards. That's a Russian number. And what I did is I went out there, out in front of the Turks, because he came out between the Turks and us, and I took some C3 and I put it in the tracks very quietly. And I put a fuse that gave me a full minute to get away. But I had to go there during the early day, the day before, and I stayed out in the bushes, and then when the tank came out, and I blew a track off that tank.
Took a whole track off of the whole
just
wheel.
Yeah, just enough that it broke the track so it couldn't move. Well, 3 or 4 months later, that tank was still stuck there. It couldn't go no place. It just stayed right there. The whole time I left Korea, that tank was still sitting as far as I'm concerned. But I remember it was R something, but it was backwards, so that's why I knew it was a Russian tank. It wasn't. And I found that very amazing because here we were fighting in Korea. Truman says, this is not a war, this is a police action. And then on the other hand, they would say, well, this is a United Nations action. United Nations, Russia is part of the United Nations. How come we're fighting them? If it's supposed to be United Nations, Russia should have been on our side. China should have been on our side. They should have all been part of the United Nations. But it wasn't. It was communists against freedom.
Yeah.
That's what the war was. And they said it's not a war. Truman kept saying it all the time. It's not a war. It's only a police action. Well, I found out too that in Korea, through some other sources, that they had an atomic bomb over there. That if they would have used any kind of weapons like gas or that type of weapon, we would use the atomic bomb because we had the atomic bomb in Korea. I found that out later. You know, the fighting is going on. It's a story. What happened? Well, almost every day something happened. Almost every day we have to go on a patrol. Even today, I can't eat chop suey. The smell of chop suey brings me back like a memory. Like some guys that have post-traumatic stress disorder.
You won't eat Chinese food.
No,
I can't
really.
eat Chinese food. Because like one night I was on a patrol with Guy Hastings there. The guy that got more medals than here. But anyhow, I was on a patrol with him and stuff. And we were supposed to do just a reconnaissance patrol. We had to go where the Chinese were. And we got behind their lines and stuff. And they were cooking chop suey. Or food like that. And it was really,
You can smell
just
it.
the thought of it, I got heartburns. That's what I thought of it, chop suey. Even today I can't eat chop suey. But we didn't shoot it out with them that night. We just watched them cook their stuff and see what they were doing and that kind of stuff. And then we came back, reported back what was going on. But then another night we had to go do what would be a contact patrol. So we had to do a contact patrol meant you have to go over and shoot at them, have them shoot at you, stuff, get them action going. And this way, by getting the action going, what they would do is they would see how many of us there, where they were firing their rockets from, or their mortar rounds. It's mostly mortar rounds, and then they had percussion grenades. They didn't amount to much, but what they would do. So when they would shoot their mortar rounds and that kind of stuff, we could keep track of that, and I could call for our artillery or the Navy to come in and drop some napalm on them or whatever, so we could really give them a lot of destruction. So I guess a lot of times they didn't want to fire back because they didn't want to give up their position. Once they would give up their position, we knew where they were at, and we knew just how to respond to them. So, but almost every day it was either this or it was that. There's another thing to do. Like if you read the story here about this guy here, there's James Foley and his name. Damn it, name. Well, anyhow, Jim Malone, yeah. He got shot up stuff, and we're carrying him back, and we couldn't carry him anymore. So what we had to do is we put him in a rice paddy, and we covered him up in a rice paddy, and we left him there for a whole day. He didn't even know when he was there for a whole day. And so we left him in there, and the next day we went and got him, and he says, I thought you guys were here all the time. I never realized I was here alone. And it's all right in this thing right here. Tree ant, don't forget that patrol. And that's what we did, the patrols like this thing. So if you want a copy of this, I'll give you a copy of this thing here. And the Stars and Stripes and that too. This is what we sometimes had to take some of these guys from the Stars and Stripes out in the patrol because they wanted to see what it was all about.
Yeah. Can you talk about your interaction with the international troops? I know you mentioned Turkey earlier. What was it like working with them?
Yes, but didn't fight directly with the Turks, but we did watch them and they did watch us, and they did give us some support, like for that night of that Operation Mousetrap. They knew about it, and they were watching, and they were giving us support too, because to get out there where they wanted me to get, the Turks had, well, the mountain was sitting like this, but they had a long finger going out towards the middle of the valley in front of the Turks. So we had to let the Turks know what we were doing because we had to go up almost on a hill and then come down that long finger out to the valley to set up the mousetrap type of thing.
Yeah, you don't want to be hit by friendly fire.
That's right. So they had to know what we were doing. And a lot of times, my mountain was like over here, and they were on this mountain here. And I could watch them do a lot of stupid things all the time in the fighting, but I could watch them. As a matter of fact, on my hill, it was a hole, a pretty big hole, and I used to sit there and watch and give reports on what was going on. And you never believe what I sat on. There was the Chinese that got blown up. This much of his leg was sticking out of the ground. And that was my seat. I would sit on his foot.
Oh.
Because it was frozen.
It was frozen. It was sticking out the ground.
Oh,
I used to sit on his foot and I'd watch out in the valley. There was my seat. There was his foot right there. It was sticking out of the ground. All of his body was all bare. Just this much was sticking out of the ground. Well, actually, sometimes people don't understand what war does to some people. I am very, very fortunate, I guess, that maybe the part that it killed in my brain, maybe I was fortunate because maybe I would have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
Maybe that stopped that from happening inside my head because there was so many things that happened all the time. It was always, every day was something new that was happening. Every day was another thing that was happening. Whether it was a reserve area drinking, like Crow, one time, in the reserve area, he was being bad, he's not supposed to drink. And he started acting like an Indian, acting like crazy and stuff, started shooting and stuff. And I was talking with the guard, where they told me I had to go quiet him down. Couldn't get him quieted down and stuff, so a couple of the guys started getting attention. I had to hit him from behind to knock him down to
Calm him down.
tie him up, just to keep him sober, and after the next day when he was sober, he was fine. See what happened. He didn't hold it against me. But when we reserve, the Indians, of course, Oklahoma National Guard, Oklahoma is a high Indian type state and have a lot of Indians in the National Guard. Of course, people join the National Guard. Why? Money. It's a wage. It's a way of making some type of money to give to their family. Just like when I joined the service, I joined money. My family, my mother, and my brothers and sisters needed money. There was no money around. And the same thing with Oklahoma. I mean, Indians joined the National Guard because Indians couldn't get drafted because Indians are not Americans. You can't draft them into the service. They can join, but you can't draft them.
Interesting.
If you go on a casino on an Indian reservation, people don't realize it, but you're out of the country. If something happens,
yeah.
if something happens to you, you can't take them to court.
Yeah, it's on reservation. It's
on
reservation law.
It's out of the country.
That's like when you go to a casino, they take
right.
all your money, you can't get back at them.
Can't back at 'em. It's out of the country. If they cheat, that's too bad. So that's the part that sometimes a lot of people don't understand about wars and stuff. Wars are crazy, but you know, all the things that were bad about the war, my country, I'm very proud of, because they put my picture up in Boscawen. I do things like have my picture on the front page of the paper, and all kinds of write-up in the paper about what I'm doing with the 100 Nights of Remembrance. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but this is a thing that we do for veterans that have passed away. We blow taps every night at 7 o'clock at Mount Calvary Cemetery, and we do it at Boscawen also.
For 100 days.
For 100 days. We do it from Memorial Day to September 11th. We do this every night. At 7 o'clock. We blow the taps. And we take young ROTC kids from West High School to do the honors, and they do the taps and stuff. And every day I pick somebody up to bring down there because they don't have a ride sometimes. I take them down. So I help out with that. And it's part of what I do. My country does for me. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to do these kind of things. And it shows. They have the picture in the paper.
Would you do it again?
That's my wife.
Huh?
What?
I was 20 years old. Now she's 17 years old.
Would you do it again?
Would I do it again? Knowing what I know? Probably I would do it again, but with a different attitude. I would do it with much more pride. I was doing it back then because I was kind of stuck into doing it. Kind of. I was proud after it was done, what I did. But at the time, I was like in hell. When they tell me, you gotta do this, you gotta go and do that, this has gotta get done. And a lot of decisions are left to me, like to do it. I have to take some guys out on the patrol, we have to take this. I didn't like to do that. I hated to do that. I hated to go out and shoot up some Chinese or North Koreans or whoever they might be, clearing their houses, taking people out of their houses. Would I do that again? Well, maybe if I know what I know today, maybe I would do it with more finesse. I would do it in a better way, with a better attitude. It's not something that anybody likes to do, to see somebody die, or a friend die, or an enemy die. It doesn't make any difference. It's still people. And I think everybody should watch the movie Taking Chance Back.
Yeah, you'd probably like that.
Okay.
You'd write it down.
Alright, I think we're good.